This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
4 minutes after 10 is the time. You are listening to an increasingly sort of, I don't know quite what the word is. I can't say that I'm embarrassed necessarily by how much I am learning as a result of these trade negotiations that aren't really negotiations at all. But the scale of my ignorance when I cast my vote on the most important political issue of my lifetime, the scale of my ignorance is actually quite hard to believe. I knew next to nothing. I knew, for example, that the Common Agricultural Policy and some of the fishing rights that we'd surrendered in return for economic boosts in other areas were the most vulnerable parts of support for the European Union membership. I knew that farms and fish were the areas in which it would be easier to argue that we had somehow got the dirty end of the stick, but only if you were myopic enough to pretend that none of the other areas of commerce existed. And when I started joking about how eventually it'll all be just people shouting fish, I was actually joking, because my understanding of the issue even then was a little bit trusting, I think. I can't pretend, and we're going to make a special effort today to have an informed and intelligent conversation about our national interest. This is not going to be one of those days where we sort of high-five each other about how easy it is to pull apart even the most convinced of Brexiters on actual detail and facts, because there's no joy in that for me anymore. There's no pleasure in that for me anymore at all. It feels a little bit like bullying, to be honest with you, because it's not their fault. They know so little. Yeah, that of course sounds condescending, patronising and sneering, but there comes a point where people who don't know anything, insisting that they know everything, have to be slightly patronised or condescended. It's why I'm so keen to stress this morning, first, early doors, I can't believe how little I knew. If you told me, for example, and I'll get this right because it's a number, and numbers are one of the few things we can at least file under indisputable. 75% of fish caught in the UK is exported, mostly to the European Union. The majority of fish eaten here is imported, which is, of course, less pertinent to this conversation, because if we do more fishing, we could import less. But the fact that 75% of the fish caught here is exported is the reason why the European Union yesterday said, if you want to be able to trade freely and have no tariffs in all of these areas, then we're going to have to keep things as they are with regard to fishing as well, because that was the give and the take. That was the quid and the pro and the quo. But fingers in ears, blindfolds on, start shouting, fish. And it really has come to that now. I can't quite believe it. It was funny up until, even a fortnight ago? If I'd end a call with someone and I'd go, fish passports, blue passports, fish, and there was literally nothing else at the time that we could have filed under tangible benefits. And now it's come true. I might have a little experiment and start predicting things that I want to happen rather than things that I don't want to happen, but I'm pretty sure will. The negotiation is the first time that the European Union have essentially conceded that they are prepared to take an economic hit. And it's not out of some sense of sort of supranational masochism. It's because I do think we've got to start finding areas where we can all agree, or maybe not all. If we take the 10% on both extremes, the 10% who would stay in the European Union even if we all had to wear hair shirts and start flogging ourselves at 6 o'clock in the town square, and the 10% who sadly are prepared to sacrifice the economic health of a nation upon the altar of a blue passport that they could have had anyway. We have to leave them out of the debate now. Unfortunately, I mean, the leading Brexit campaigners in Parliament, the Duncan Smiths and the Rees-Moggs and the like, they are in that mad 10%. I don't know anyone in the mad pro-EU 10%. I genuinely don't. I don't know anyone who would say, we must stay in at all costs. It's the customs union and the single market departure that divides people, and it shouldn't. As the European Union tried to explain yesterday, as Donald Tusk tried to explain yesterday, what they're doing is seeking to apply established rules to our departure, even though applying the established rules will in the short term harm them, possibly in the long term as well. It wouldn't harm them as much as breaking the rules. Do you see? So we have to sort of see it as an entity. The pre-Maastricht entity was a single market. We invented it. Margaret Thatcher effectively invented it. For many people, it was her most important economic legacy. It overshadows a lot of the things that trip more easily off the tongue from her premiership. But we invented the single market. And one of the key conditions of that invention was to make it impossible to break the single market. You can't enjoy its benefits without meeting its responsibilities. I'm on a journey. Look, if I'm getting any of this wrong, then help me out. But I can't see any benefit at all in joining the ranks of people now who are saying either, oh, it doesn't matter, or pretending that things aren't looking bad, because that is how you leave the door open for the mad 10% to come steaming through and turn us into a kind of, well, a very weird and backwards-looking country. What do you get in return for being weird and backwards? Well, you get a blue passport. So we invented the single market. We persuaded our European Union partners to join it with us, to help us build it. It contains a whole system of rules, irrespective of the political union that began with the Maastricht Treaty. The rules that bind the single market could be loosely distilled down to, if you touch it, you have to buy it. You can't break it. You can't say, well, I like that bit, and that bit, but I'm not getting involved in that bit. That's why it's called a single market, not a multiple market, not a slightly different market for every member. It's a single market in which everybody obeys the established rules. And the Donald Tusk speech yesterday almost appeared to sort of address a constituency that I don't find anymore in this country, the constituency of people who can still see quite clearly. He said, I fully understand and respect Theresa May's political objectives to demonstrate at any price that Brexit will be a success and was the right choice. That's the bit where I get confused. The at any price. Why at any price? But of course, he adds, I'm sorry, this is not our objective. This is a speech in Luxembourg. No member state is free to pick only those sectors of the single market it likes. So, for example, the fishing rights is part of the single market framework. So if you want to enjoy tariff-free trading with the single market, you have to keep obeying the rules that were established when it was set up. I think you do. I can just about see an argument that I think they're being a bit political. I think they know the ludicrous weight that's been placed on the fishing industry in the context of our broader economy, and they are kind of using it to force May's hand. But if we're exporting 75% of our landed fish largely to the EU, and we want to carry on doing so without paying a tariff at the border, I can't see how we can really argue we should carry on. We should be able to carry on as normal with our fishing trade, but you're not allowed to carry on as normal with yours. I don't know. I genuinely can't believe that it's come true. I still was sniggering, probably last week, because people started texting and tweeting me. It became a bit of a thing, a bit of a joke when you hear one of these so-called gammons talking about imaginary mythical gains. You sort of became quite amusing just to distill it all down to the word fish, which is what it is. But it's come true now. It's incredible. It's genuinely incredible. Who do we want to talk to today? Business people? People who actually export? Or the rest of us who are still a little bit dazed? I don't want any real arguments today. The only circumstances in which we'll have a bit of a Barney is if you say things that are demonstrably untrue. And I accept that it's very, very hard now to argue that this is a good thing without saying things that are demonstrably untrue. And I accept also, in the spirit of absolute openness and fairness, it's quite frustrating for people who ring this programme to be held to account in a way that other programmes and other journalists and presenters don't hold the actual professionals to account. So somebody like Nadine Dorries or Ian Duncan Smith or Jacob Rees-Mogg can speak demonstrable nonsense. Jacob Rees-Mogg tweeting an article that even the Sun has been forced to withdraw for being an absolute pyramid of piffle. But he hasn't, last time I checked, he hasn't removed it from his account. So he's happy to continue knowingly to mislead his fans. And then, of course, someone rings this programme from Basingstoke and they've believed the nonsense that's been poured into their ears by these charlatans and spivs. And they end up getting embarrassed, when really I would rather confine the embarrassment to the snake oil salesman rather than the snake oil purchasers. Where are your milestones? WhatsApp exchange when Nadine Dorries said, I don't understand what the customs union is at all, but I'm having quite a lot of arguments about it with people, so could someone fill me in? Someone fills her in and she says, it's very complicated. I'm really glad we're leaving. So her grounds for leaving the European Union, with respect, and I say this slightly reluctantly, her grounds for leaving the European Union essentially are that she's too stupid to understand what it is. And it seems to me that we're all there now. We were all a bit too stupid or ill-informed to understand what it was and what it did. So we got a reality check yesterday. It's a reality check that hasn't bitten quite as deeply as it would have done if there hadn't been a state-sanctioned assassination attempt on the streets of Salisbury. That at least is the current belief of our security services. It would be biting rather harder. I don't know what's going to happen now. I've got a horrible feeling, that either we're going to sign a free trade agreement that is the first free trade agreement in history that would leave signatories less free to trade than they were before. Again, I'm hoping to challenge on that if you can think of another one. But we're going to sign a free trade agreement. They say it will be like Canada, but Canada started from a point of having no trade agreement with the European Union. So Canada signed something that is better than having nothing. We've currently got everything, and we're going to sign something that is slightly better than having nothing, or even a lot better than having nothing. But we've already got everything. Do you see why I'm getting so worried now? Because logic and understanding seem to have just been completely kicked out of the window. And for 18 months... some of us have been saying, I can't see, and maybe we could have said it in a more polite way, but there's so much vileness coming from the other side. Enemies of the people, crush the saboteurs, traitors. It's quite hard sometimes not to swing back. Some of us have been saying for 18 months, I don't see how this ends, except with relative disaster. And now it's coming true. I'll tell you what we'll do. Persuade me that it isn't. Persuade me that there are still reasons to be cheerful. If you can, I will make a promise that I'll try not to monster you if you don't deserve it, and you make a promise not to use empty soundbites, meaningless slogans, or demonstrable untruths. How could anyone today be cheerful? How could anybody who voted Remain feel anything other than really disappointed that the hope that some silver lining would eventually appear has now disappeared? And how could anyone who voted Leave, except people who actually want to be poorer, because you think that Johnny Foreigner is going to be hurt even more than you are by this? How can anyone be cheerful by what happened yesterday is staggeringly awful. But of course, we still rely upon a print media that is duty-bound to pretend that it isn't. And what's the new test on this programme when you're struggling to understand why anybody would be doing something so obviously injurious? Ask yourself what a completely amoral billionaire would do. Because if it's going to be good for them, you can be pretty confident that it's going to be bad for everybody else.
This is LBC. This is LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 21 minutes after 10, and it is a different flavoured attempt today to find things to just cheer up those of us who are now pretty much completely persuaded that we're doing something really daft. Everything Donald Tusk said yesterday could have been and was predicted 18 months ago. You can't do this, you can't do that, and there are no circumstances in which being out of the club can be better than being in it. But we're determined to leave, to become the first ever signatories to a trade agreement that renders a country less free to trade with the people they're signing the treaty with than they were before. I can't believe those words. Anyway, you're going to cheer me up today, and I'm not going to argue with anyone. Dean's in Oxford. Dean, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I wonder... I'm a little bit concerned, actually.
Well, you're supposed to be cheering me up.
I'm disabled.
Yes.
And I rely on the European medical card
Right.
I have to book into a hospital when I go and see my son and grandchildren in Germany,
Yeah.
just in case I get taken ill.
So you were one of the few people that perhaps fully understood the value of the European medical card.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know thousands of people, literally thousands of people, that are disabled because I'm on the forum.
Yes.
And they're all of the concern that they go to Europe. And what we've discovered is that my particular condition would cost me £700 medical insurance for a week.
This was. I do remember people talking about this prior to the referendum. I think it got drowned out by all the Project Fear noise. Can I ask how you voted?
I voted Remain, James.
Okay, because you knew that this was on the cards.
Well, I've got a son who works in Germany, and I've got grandchildren in Germany, and it will make it more difficult for me to go and see them. Basically.
I hope that that your fears are unfounded, but I can only apologise for not having the knowledge to
No, it's okay.
reassure you.
It was drowned out, basically. It was mentioned once, because I've been listening out for it, and it's only been mentioned once in all this time. My fears are that £700 for a week on medical insurance, because we've been looking round.
Yes.
And it would make it just impossible for me to go. I mean, I'm disabled and I'm a pensioner.
Yeah.
And I don't have that kind of money to put up front, because that's what I would have to do.
Yes.
And the European medical card gives me like emergency cover,
And how much do we know about the likelihood of it being retained? Because I know that she asked, and one thing they didn't dismiss yesterday is remaining in agencies on medicine, aviation, and chemicals, but that doesn't cover. No, that doesn't cover you. But this is an example of why I mean, that's why I asked you how you voted, because I'm embarrassed by how little I knew when I had the arrogance to put a cross in a box in June 2016. Arrogance is a bit harsh, maybe, but
Well, I mean, I knew about. I was worried about the medical card, which was one of the reasons.
Yes.
But the other reason is, my son's in Germany, and he's worried now about his position. He's been worried for the last sort of 18 months because he don't know what will happen if we leave and we don't get an agreement on the people, you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean, and oddly, both Brussels and London, Brussels and Westminster currently appear to be using people like your son, or forgetting about them altogether. And the European Parliament is the body that is agitating to protect their interests. And by that, obviously, I don't mean the ones that we send to that institution. Dean, if I find out any good news, I'll pass it on to you, mate. But otherwise, just hang in there.
This is the first time I've been able to get through to you.
Well,
God knows how long.
We'll give you the secret number so that you get straight through next time. There isn't a secret number. It's 25 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I mean it. I genuinely do. I'm not going to fight with anyone who doesn't try to lie to me today. I just want reasons, and obviously that wasn't one of them, reasons why this isn't a really bad day for Britain, when finally everyone has to admit that all we're doing now is shouting fish at each other. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. John's in Wallington. John, reasons to be cheerful.
Hi, James. How are you?
Well, I've been pretty clear on that already for the last 26 minutes.
James, I'm going to be very frank with you. I voted leave, and I voted leave for one reason, and one reason alone. My fear for the last 5 to 10 years has been for my children's future in this country. And I honestly don't believe, and nobody knew the details of Europe and our country and the intricacies of it. And
I think some people did, but they were the ones that we kind of ignored, wasn't it?
Well, I don't think properly, because it wasn't explained very well to anybody. Nobody gave me a reason that my fundamental belief is that this country couldn't cope with the volume of European nationals coming to this country.
It's a smaller sum than non-European nationals. You knew that, did you?
Yes, I did know that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And it was a government decision not to implement more robust.
Well, exactly right, and that's where the government have let us down, because it's
Successive government.
Yeah, no. Agreed, James. Agreed, and that's the honest truth. If I even knew they had the ability to do that, and I didn't.
Nor did I. I've got 20/20 hindsight on this. I'm about 80% sure I didn't realise prior. Otherwise, I suspect I'd have been shouting it from the rooftops. But I was still working at the BBC, John, and trying to be all impartial.
but I think this is the problem. I think this is where the government and successive governments have let us down, because I don't think the Brexit vote would have won had the government come back and said, look, we realise that this is a big issue for many people. We can actually do something about this.
But do you know why they didn't? This is where you and I disagree with each other, and I would with characteristic arrogance, John, I'd insist that I actually have the facts on my side. The reason why the government didn't do it is that they knew it would be economically injurious. European Union migration, in particular, is a net gain to the UK Treasury. Not only do we need the money to sustain an increasingly old and fragile population, but we also need the bodies to come in and do the stuff that just the simple jobs of looking after them. So I've said I'm not going to argue with anybody today, and you've managed to build your whole castle on immigration without sounding remotely racist. But
no, I'm not, James.
I know.
The point of it is, if the government could then, let's be fair, over the last 20 years, we've not built enough houses. My issue is that my children, where are they going to live?
The reason they've not built enough houses, we worked it out on Monday, because by not building houses, they drive up the price of the houses that they do build. So you end up with Theresa May on Monday having to beg house builders to stop pursuing profit and to start selling more houses for less money. This is why these words that none of us really understood fully, words like neoliberalism, the idea that putting profit ahead of absolutely everything else, that explains why they haven't built more houses. If you had 10 people trying to buy 10 houses and someone gave you the chance to blow up 2 of them, you'd have 10 people trying to buy 8 houses. The price would probably go higher than it would have done when you had 10. That's why they've done it, and we've let them. And people like you, with love and respect, you're blaming expats for it.
No, I'm not. I'm really not
kind of
blaming expats for it. No, I'm not, because I'm not worried about the people that have left the country to move to Europe.
No, I just set a little trap for you there. By expats, I meant immigrants, but we don't call them immigrants if they've left Britain to go to Europe. We call them expats, whereas I'm thinking of all the French and the Polish and the Spanish and the Italian expats.
No, but listen, James, I work in the construction, and I work alongside these people, and I'm fully aware of what we need and what we require to because we've stopped training people, we've stopped apprenticeships. Young people now don't learn.
Why have we stopped apprenticeships, John?
Well, because everything's gone into education, isn't it? And it's about money.
Because if you're running a construction firm and you have to spend a little bit of money on training someone, or you can divvy it up among shareholders, what are you going to do?
Well, exactly right.
So we're back to the house building. It's always, think of the amoral billionaires. What do they want? And actually the flow of, this is Jeremy Corbyn's attitude to the freedom of movement. He argues that the flow of bodies into the country actually allows them to not train, not do apprenticeships, but strong trade unions could insist on apprenticeships, and they could collectively bargain for higher wages and better working conditions.
So what we're actually agreeing to say at the moment is, over the last 20 years, we've ruined this country.
Over the last 20 years, what?
We've ruined the country. We've gone down.
Well, it doesn't feel ruined to me, although I live quite a privileged and rarefied existence. I was in an NHS hospital earlier this week. It doesn't feel ruined to me, but I appreciate for an awful lot of people it does. And the people who've ruined it, I'm not going to lay this at your door, John, because it wouldn't be fair, but the people that ruined it love the sound of you blaming it on EU migration. They love it. Seriously, they'll be chinking their anti-elitist glasses together at the sound of an honest British working man describing a country brought to its knees economically in many ways, the so-called left behind, blaming it on the utterly, utterly innocent others. Simon Conway's here now with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
I'm sticking by my promise, even though some of you think I should be indulging a little bit more of my finely tuned anger. I'm not going to get angry with anyone. John was a lovely bloke. A lot of you picking up on that. And yet, someone who worked in construction persuaded that immigration and a housing shortage was a closer relationship than the construction industry and a housing shortage. Lisa responds to him by saying, I feel sorry. John seems like a decent bloke, even though he thinks all the problems in this country are down to me, my husband and my kids. And people like us, I would still go for a pint with him. I guess I'll tell you where I am now, analogy fans. I am now accepting that the house is burning and just hoping we can save as much as possible. And that, it seems to me, was pretty much the flavour of Theresa May's Mansion House speech. But unfortunately, it's not us that get to decide what we can and can't save. But in many ways, it's the European Union, who we now have to ask to help us minimise the damage we're doing to our own house, while the arsonists continue to run around high-fiving each other and talking about unaccountable elites. 10:39 is the time. I don't know where the morning's gone. I'll stay with this for as long as you want me to. Edward is in Luton. Edward, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, James. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Edward.
Right, hi there. Good to speak to you at last. I've rang in a few times. I wanted to take you to task on this question about the economic hit that you continually press on about regarding what the UK has lost with regards to this exit of the EU. And I'll set the stage by saying that I am an importer. I've taken a huge hit, and I do employ a Polish worker as well. Okay?
How huge a hit have you taken?
Well, an enormous hit. I mean, probably 30 or 40% of my revenue has gone. But
okay.
Can I start with
30 or 40%?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
and you voted to leave, did you?
My life, James, is not based on how much money I've got only.
No,
okay?
no, you're very lucky. Nor's mine. But a lot of people can't think about anything else.
Yes. And Mohammed bin, can I give you the analogy because you're a fan of it? Okay?
Yes.
Mohammed bin Salman has been feted by the Queen and the establishment elite, and signing 150 billion pound deals for our arms and weapons, which, by the way, our German neighbours have refused to do.
Yes, I'm going to hurry you slightly. There are a lot of people waiting.
It enriches us.
Yes.
It enriches us. Okay, it enriches all of us. Okay, and that's the reason why we've done it, because it enriches us. But
we should start dealing heroin then.
Well, no, I for one would gladly give up the sale of our Typhoon jet, which enriches BAE and the other systems, if it meant that children weren't continuing to be crucified or people weren't continuing...
Mate, I would as well. With respect, Edward, we did this on yesterday's show. I've got a full switchboard. I appreciate that you've struggled to get through in the past, but you're here now. Don't blow it. What's the point you want to make?
Right, the point I want to make is, along with lots of other European partners and lots of other European regions, the reason why the populist vote has risen in Italy and Germany and here, the reason why is because large swathes of the countries have been left behind, and the elite and the establishment, a la people who have lots of money...
Like the blokes who own the Telegraph and the blokes who own the Ritz and the bloke who owns the Times and the people that run the Mail and the people that own the Express, all of those pro-Brexit elitists.
And so-called Christian Liberal Democrat elite.
Yeah, mate, I'm really sorry, but I'm not learning anything from you at all. Reasons to be cheerful. Go.
Lots of those people in those large areas, like the north of England, Wallonia in Belgium, lots of areas are much happier at the prospect and the thought that there is going to be real change. There may be real change.
Why? Very briefly, Edward, give me your favourite example of the real change they're going to see.
Possibly, it might...
not possiblies, the certainlys.
You deal in possibly.
But I've got no reasons to be cheerful. You have. What are they?
Certainly, they have been listened to and have the prospect of being listened to.
What's going to improve in their lives?
I would imagine it's a possibility in the future that they will be listened to rather than left behind. Because
so what's going to improve in their lives?
The rise of fascism will occur again.
Oh, okay. It already is, mate, but it's rising among people who can't answer this question. Last chance, Edward. I'm not going to argue. Edward.
So you don't want to listen to them. You want them to remain the same. You want them to have the status quo. You want unelected officials in Europe to continue to govern the whole of Europe.
I don't know. Do you remember in the introduction when I said, let's avoid the empty slogans, let's avoid the meaningless soundbites, let's concentrate on demonstrable evidence? Mate, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm sorry. I'm not. No, I'm not, Edward. I'm not going to argue with you because I've set the parameters of the conversation. You give me reasons to be cheerful. You use words like possibility, imagine, left behind, far right, populist. I'm talking about the pound in the pocket. You can take a 30 to 40% hit to your revenues and keep bouncing along. I'll tell you now, you patronise the people in the communities you describe when you imagine, even implicitly, that they could take a 30 to 40% hit to their already paltry income and be anything other than poverty-stricken. They'll have a voice. They'll have a voice, mate, but they won't have a pot to pee in. It's 10:43. Alex is in Leon C. Alex, reasons to be cheerful.
I don't think there are any reasons to be cheerful. I am a former member of UKIP Leave campaigner, and I organised an event around fishing.
Gosh.
And over the last 9 months, I've completely changed my position. And I think we should now ideally stay in the European Union. And it's kind of embarrassing. I watch on a daily basis just how badly the British government is handling it.
You break my heart, mate, because I kind of need people like you to come out, with respect to the last fella, who really couldn't have been flimsier if he'd set out to be the king of flimsy land. I hope that people like you could sort of school people like me, could still give people like me maybe just a little slap, a little reality check, and say, yeah, all right, that's that, and that is bad. But what you forget is this, and the fella who's organised a fishing-based, as a UKIP member, a fishing-based protest to turn around and say, I've realised it's all a horrible mistake. That makes me want to punch someone, Alex. Not necessarily you, but it makes me very, very sad.
Well, I think at the beginning of the Brexit process, there may have been an opportunity then to come up with something meaningful, but
we could have done, but not once the red lines were established. I think that the people who were fine with the European Union until Maastricht, that political union, was the breaking point for them. I think my old mate Bill Cash falls into that category. I know that David Alan Green, one of the best tweeters on the subject, he very much does as well. But as soon as she laid down the red lines, the customs union single market red lines, and you had people in your party insisting that we'd be able to be like Switzerland and Norway, but as soon as it was announced that we were leaving the customs union and the single market, they started pretending that they'd wanted and promoted that all along. You've been conned more than anyone else has, Alex.
Probably, yes. But maybe a couple of years ago I should have engaged my brain a little more.
We can all say that. What do we do now? Where do we go? Because, I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but it infuriates me that you don't get held accountable for what you have done.
Yes, well, I think the best thing now would be the opportunity to have a general election or a vote now that... And
then we could end up with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, which means any small corners of the listenership to this programme who haven't already been upset or offended by something I've said, we've now gone unanimous, because I don't want Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, and that's what will happen now. And it's your fault.
Yes.
We can still laugh. How commonplace is your position among your former mates?
Well, I think a lot of people are disenfranchised, but
yes.
What I still find concerning is there are a large number of people who think we're heading for sunny uplands.
Still?
Oh, yeah. Apparently we're Treasure Island, and the EU is going to be massively hit.
And I guess I've forgotten his name, but the last fella on before you would be in that category, just insisting that these... I mean, the soundbites are running out. We're talking about fascists in Italy being evidence that leaving the European Union is a good idea. It's nuts. What about fish, though? Actually, I'm late. Very briefly. Why, on the fish issue, which is all that your former colleagues in UKIP are left with now, how did we get that so wrong?
Well, I mean, the European Union has shafted quite a lot of fishermen in this country.
So you can put it like that. I would argue now that we did actually surrender on that front as the price we paid for all the gains we made on other fronts.
Yes, and it's going to be surrendered again in the upcoming negotiations for free trade or whatever.
If we want to continue exporting 75% of the fish landed here to largely the European Union, it seems a fairly straightforward quid pro quo. That I'm not going to. I'm actually. Should we hug it out? Should we shake hands and part as friends?
Okay. Yeah.
So I mean it, because it does infuriate me, and I do think people, and forgive me, I don't like the phrase "like you," but you've described yourself pretty clearly as a former UKIP member who organised an event around fishing and now wishes that we could just get in the DeLorean and go back in time. I have to start creating a space in which people like you feel comfortable saying what you've just said to me, and I can't do that if I now start shouting at you. 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:52 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are wondering, I suppose, where the good news lies, the things that will be demonstrably better than they are now, the tangible benefits. Because yesterday's announcements by Donald Tusk seemed to acknowledge, as Theresa May, I believe, and I am bending over backwards to acknowledge the possibility of being wrong, I believe Theresa May and Donald Tusk have both now conceded that this is going to damage us both economically. The European Union's interests are easy to understand. You can't have an institution built upon rules without enforcing those rules, and what they're trying to do now is enforce previously unused rules regarding how member states leave, and they accept that that is going to involve some negative impact upon their members, their economies, but I still don't know, and I'll tell you why I don't know what we're supposed to get out of it. All the people that said it would be a good idea have turned tail. David Davis, exact same benefits. Liam Fox, easiest deal in history. You know? And the list goes on. We can be like Norway, we can be like Switzerland, and you end up in this incredible place, intellectually, where the people on the Remain side of the argument who argued that we'd have to leave the customs union and the single market if we left the European Union. It's not necessarily true if you look at EEA and EFTA, but the people who argued that, people on the other side now are saying, they told you, so you can't pretend you didn't know, while they were arguing largely, not exclusively, but they were arguing largely that we'd be able to have the exact same benefits. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. 10:54 is the time. Marcus is in Westminster. Marcus, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. I'm in Westminster because I'm MP for Yeovil in Somerset.
Welcome.
Hi. And I just thought it would be great to call in because I respect your show and what you do, and I think you're a really good journalist and able to engage with facts.
Is there a big butt coming, Marcus?
No. Actually, there isn't. So I was encouraged by the sort of tone of the start of your programme, which I listen to quite often, to sort of try to have a rational sort of a conversation about.
Well, let's crack that with respect. Let's crack on with it, because I wouldn't want people to think MP's got special treatment or extra time.
So basically, I was in the US and Canada with the International Trade Committee the week before last.
Yes.
And it was interesting. I examined Greg Hans, who's the trade minister in our committee yesterday, and one of the things that I was pointing out was that some of the numerical assumptions that people have been making about, effectively they've been saying how little benefit there will be to the UK economy of potentially doing trade deals around the rest of the world, just don't really stack up when you look at the numbers behind them.
But they have to be better than what we've currently got, don't they?
Well, look, it's
No, I won't look. They just do, because in order to persuade people to do something, you have to persuade them that they'll end up in a better place than where they started. And you don't need me to remind you that Donald Trump's just announced a trade war.
Well, my position has always been that net things in the medium term would be effectively around the same as where they are now. You know,
what about in the short term?
Some things will be a bit less than they were before, and other things will be more.
Would it be unfair of me to ask? Hang on a minute. Can you refer me in any way to pre-referendum pronouncements when you said things will be worse than they were before in some areas?
So when I made a speech in the House of Commons before the vote, I was very careful to set out the net effects. There were some positives and some negatives.
But these would be economic impact assessments, wouldn't they? So where are things going to be worse?
Actually, economics. A lot of it wasn't economic.
Well, we're talking. Listen, I don't want this to get fractious because I am short of time. But I'm looking for reasons to be cheerful, and saying that we can do more trade with a country that's just announced a trade war is. I mean, it's low on my dial of cheerfulness.
For example, the Aussies, when they did their free trade agreement with the US, they vastly underestimated what that would be worth to them. They've actually seen their trade increase by 50%.
But you lead me again to the question of how that is going to be better than what we've currently got. I mean, we can talk over each other until the cows come home, but
it'll make up for any extra costs of what we do with the EU.
You do know that Australia is on the other side of the world, and the European Union has a land border with the United Kingdom.
It's also a long way from the US.
Yes, it is, but we're not the US, and the US was never in the largest single market in the world, and we're leaving it, you say, to benefit from being able to trade with Australia while diminishing our ability to trade with Germany.
So just to give an example, the 0.2%, which the Treasury has said is what the potential value of doing a deal with the US might be, is about $5 billion.
Yes, and in the context of the European Union?
Well,
your own government's impact assessment. Your own government's impact. Oh, okay.
The insurance market in the US writes over $1 trillion of business every year. That's just one sector.
That's because they don't have a health service.
There is huge opportunity.
That's because they don't have a health service.
Well, health is actually a pretty small proportion of that. There's a lot more in the property.
So, okay. I'm grateful for the call. If I was to annotate what you've told me, and I am insisting that you obey the same rules as everybody else who rings the programme, reasons to be cheerful, you've given me Australia's trade deal with America being a bit better than they expected, or even a lot better than they expected. I don't want to put that words in your mouth. That's what you've got, Marcus Fish, MP for Yeovil.
One example, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Have a great day. What do you do now? Elected members of Parliament, look, we're walking away. Both sides now concede. His own Prime Minister concedes it's going to do us economic damage. Where are the pluses? Well, America signed a trade deal with Australia, and it's gone a bit better than some people predicted. What are we going to do? We're moving out of the largest single market on the planet. I don't know. I suppose the silver lining would be you could almost detect in his voice a knowledge of how ridiculous he was sounding. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. MP's always welcome to ring in, but no more welcome than you or you or you. I don't know if I can carry on with this, actually. I'll give you the number. If you really, really want to carry on with it and have something interesting to say, call me. 0345 6060 973. Viva Australia.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.